I panicked. I didn't know what was happening. I was connected to hundreds of different machines, laying completely naked. The biggest problem was that I could not feel my body. I couldn't move.
This is Atlas. At 31, he collapsed at a triathlon, 2 months in a coma, woke up at 40 kilograms with no memory of who he was.
The only thing that the doctor said were like, okay, we don't think you'll ever move. You'd most likely be in a palliative care bed on the ventilator, and that's the rest of your life. And if you're lucky, you have about 5 years.
But Atlas had been given something rare, a complete reset. For 2 days, he visualized every neural pathway from his brain to his finger.
And my pinky moved.
This is about what happens when high performance kills you, and how coming back teaches you what it means to be alive.
I would invite every man that listens to this to reconnect with his why, because through that process, you will get to know who you are.
This is a man who died, come back, and emerged with wisdom most will never know. And today, he's here to share it with you. Please welcome Atlas. Atlas, thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure.
I went for a walk this morning and I was so looking forward to this talk. With everything that I've discovered about you over the last weeks, maybe months, you never cease to blow me away with the stories that you got. I know that the conversation we're going to have today is only going to be such a tiny part of it. But I trust whatever comes out in today's session, conversation, podcast, I think it'll be super serving. What I'm really curious about is the experience that you've had in life is one that no one would ever wish for. Yet the truth, the insight, the wisdom that has come from, I think, literally dying and then coming back as a blank slate, an artist for your next life at this stage in your life, whenever it was 30s, maybe
Late 31, yeah.
Late 31. Incredible to come back and rebuild it all as the new version of you, rebirth to like the literal degree. I'd love to hear how you experienced that, waking up after being in a coma for months with no recollection of who it is that you once were and stepping into this new version of yourself. What was the experience?
Thank you for the question. It will be a long one, but I'll explain very quickly. As you've heard on your own event, a very short part of my story where it comes to waking up and really feeling a lot of dread, a sense of helplessness. That was the immediate feelings that I've had in my head. I panicked. I didn't know what was happening. As you just mentioned now, I was connected to hundreds of different machines, cables running around my body, laying completely naked. There's a small piece of cloth that was covering my junk. And the biggest problem was that I could not feel my body in the sense of like I could move. I could move my eyeballs and I could scan the surroundings. And this, yeah, I'm sure you've been in the hospital. There's this like weird smell in the hospital, which is like very clean. And I smelled that. I knew that smell from my childhood because I spent a lot of time in hospital, partially as a patient, but partially as someone who was visiting because my mom took me there a lot of times as a nurse. I feel like I grew up there in the hospital. So it was a very weird feeling of helplessness, being completely locked in my body and not being able to move. On the other hand, I kind of felt safe because I knew that space. And I started to slowly realize where I was, what was happening. And that same sense of dread that I've had, and I've been running from that dread, entered my mind, my body, my heart, I would say. The dread that I felt all these years, since 7 till 31. Although I didn't know exactly what age I was, I thought I was maybe asleep for 2 days, not 2 months. And but there were signs. There were signs where like I could look at my body and I didn't see any muscles. Like I weighed 40 something kilos on the day when I woke up. And on the day of the accident, I was 78 kilograms. So I lost a lot of muscle mass. And immediately I felt defeated. And that was something that was very foreign to me, because I've run my life until 31 as a competitor. I competed with everything and everyone that was possible. And through that competition, I found solace by achieving and running away from the pain and grief that I was feeling in my life. Usually it was extreme sports, and it ended up with triathlon. And that's why I got into coma. That's why I collapsed before the finish line of a triathlon that I really badly wanted to win, to the point where I didn't listen to my body. I didn't listen to maybe subtle signs weeks before when I was overtrained. I didn't listen to my intuition on the day of the triathlon when it was too hot, and the organizer they were cramming to actually not cancel the event. They moved it hours and hours and ended up actually running it because it was this almost unsatiable desire to prove myself. And that's what killed me. That's what actually killed me on the 24th of June 2016. And from that day onwards, when I woke up, when, as you know, that little boy entered my room and I felt more of that peace, within a few minutes, I felt safer. I really felt safer because at least I knew him. I didn't know anything else. I didn't remember my name. I didn't remember who I was as a professional. I didn't have an image of my wife, or I didn't even knew I was married at the time, if I had parents still alive. So very alone in it as well.
Who was this little boy that walked in?
The little boy was me. The little boy was...
Tell me about that.
7-year-old boy. He used to be very afraid of losing people, so he would please everyone around him, and he was always afraid when he was young to lose the love of his mom. So he would always chase validation, and already yearning for my dad's approval at very, very young age, because he was always emotionally withdrawn. And what broke that 7-year-old boy was I used to, as I mentioned, I used to go to hospital a lot with my mom because she couldn't afford to leave me at some longer shifts with daycare. And I've made a lot of friends on the pediatric unit in the hospital, which meant that I surrounded myself with sick kids. And I became sort of a protector of a girl that I met there. She was a little bit older than me. She was about 11, but she looked way more fragile. As the time when we met, she already was bedridden from cancer, from chemo. And I remember when I entered her room, my mom introduced me to the kids, and we entered this room, and she said, "This is Anna. She will not be able to play with you guys in the common rooms for the kids because she cannot leave her bed." And I remember that day I saw one of the kids go into that room with a few others, and they sat or stood next to Anna, and they started laughing at her. I was like, "Oh, you can't really play with us." They were looking at the IVs connected to her and all these machines, and it created this almost a version of me that I promised myself I will protect her as I was protecting my mom. I learned that from her because my mom never felt safe. The same year that my mom lost her dad, I met Anna. And as our friendship grew, we made a pact. We made a deal in a way that I would protect her and she would help me figure out who I'm going to be when I grow up. And what ended up happening, it was weeks of friendship. We would just go and dream our, the things that we want to do, the things that we want to achieve. But as the time went past, I started to realize that I may not be seeing, or Anna will not be seeing these dreams happen for me. Because my mom started to drop hints. At the time, you don't really understand what that means when a parent tells you that the kids you meet in the hospital, they're like little angels, that they're there, but they were sent from somewhere else and they may need to come back. And what ended up happening that specific weekend was that on Friday, I had a great time with Anna, and she said to me when I was leaving, just before I was leaving home, she said to me, I have a feeling that, because we were always talking about, how I would like to help people and even her. And she said, like, I think you're going to be a doctor. And that was the first time when I really thought about it. And I've left the hospital, had an amazing weekend with my family. And I actually, that weekend, I said to my mom, like, Mom, I think I'm going to be a doctor. And immediately my mom said to me, oh, no, you cannot be a doctor because I'm a nurse and I know all the doctors, especially the surgeons and people who are really helping others. They don't have really good families. They are always overworked. They're workaholics. Some of them I know they're cheating on their wives and all these things that I didn't want to hear as a 7-year-old boy, just discovering my dream of being a doctor. And what happened over the weekend, inside of me, that dream grew because of that resistance from my mom. And I wanted to return a favor to Anna as well, because I wanted to share with her how much I cared about her and how much I liked our friendship. She was my kind of first proper friend, I would say. And on Monday, I was super excited to go there, meet her. And I remember as vividly as now, at the door, there was this automatic door that would open to the unit, to the department and hospital. And I was running through that corridor, and just in my mind, I was replaying, I'm going to tell her that I really like her as a friend. She's helped me so much. She helped me to realize my dream. And as I was running to that room, super excited, my mom started running after me because I just sprinted out. And then as I was getting to the 14C, her room, it was a big glass, and she was always, I could always see her through the window, through the glass in the door. And as I stopped, she wasn't there. And it was very weird for me to see that. For a minute, initially, I thought I stopped at the wrong room. I was looking, oh yeah, that's 14C. Because I thought it was impossible for her not to be there. And my mom got to me. Long story short, when my mom got to me, she started to explain that Anna is no longer there. That she's passed away over the weekend. And the way she said it, she said that she went back to play with her angel friends. But that moment, when I've heard that, something inside of me broke. Literally broke. And when it did, all I knew how to do in my body was to run. And I ran through that corridor back again. I hid in one of the rooms. I knew that the nurses won't find me. And I cried there for a long time. And it was the same sense of helplessness that I felt the day when I woke up from the coma. Exactly the same. What ended up happening, as I mentioned, that boy entered my room. While I woke up, I realized that energy of that boy, almost a visual of it. I was on so much drugs, I could swear I saw him. He entered my room and he did exactly the same thing that I used to do as protector to Anna. He jumped on my bed and he looked at me, and he just looked at me with these like knowing eyes, like everything's gonna be okay. And even without him saying anything, I was like, okay, that's weird, but I feel a sense of peace immediately. And I could hear in my head him whisper, everything's going to be okay. I'm here. And you're not alone. And when I heard that, almost like this very deep sense of exhale entered into my body. Although weirdly, I was on the ventilator, so I couldn't even exhale on my own. But this sense of peace entered. And that was the moment when I started to rebuild who I am now, 9 years later.
Beautiful, man. Thank you so much for sharing. What a story. And I know there's so much more to it. That's the short version. Mm-hmm. I feel it. It's beautiful, incredible. I think you're really a wonderful demonstration of picking out some of the parts of the story of the moment in time. Maybe not all of us have had that exact kind of experience, but there's a moment in time that just changes who it is that we are forever. Whether we're running, we're escaping, we're people pleasing, we're trying to do something to either escape ourselves. Usually it's to escape ourselves, and it might look through trying to help someone else or serve someone else in a certain way, but it's oftentimes it's just escaping who it is that we are, or the unhealed hurts or truths or traumas. And I love how you recognize from that moment, and you carried it all the way through, and that was what ended up literally breaking you into this moment through running the marathon, and then coming back and having that past version of you show up to then initiate the next journey. What was that then when you're like, okay, you went from that dread, the escapism, the running away, that fear, to having the 7-year-old boy show up as the version that you needed? I love that it was yourself, your inner boy, that child that came back and did that for you, to go, okay, everything will be okay. What processes did you have to go through? And I don't know whether you reflected on who it is that you were, or it was just fundamentally different in who it is that you then started becoming at the age of 31, the rebirth moment, the artist of your new life.
Great question. To simply put it, because I've no recollection who I was, in a way, and this realization came later, so I didn't know this straight away, but what it transpired as is that I've had a blank slate. I was, as they say in Latin, tabula rasa, which is a blank paper. And on that page, I started to write a new version of me. As you mentioned in the introduction, is a version that wasn't accepting the dynamics or social constructs that I lived by until the accident. And in a way, I feel, and I don't wish that for anyone, but I feel like it was a blessing to die. I've come across many near-death experiences before that accident, but dying and accepting it set me free.
Mm.
And the processes that you ask about, there was the main one was to almost like I've unbecame who I was, and I didn't have to unravel. It was actually the other way around. I was getting to know myself again. It's someone like hit the reset button for you in life and erased a lot of these conditionings. And this is what I do now for a living. But for me, it was reset button and then now get to know yourself. And that was the process. And the first layer of that process was to get to know my body. Because by running away from grief and pain and anger that I did for all these years, I've completely disconnected from my body. I did not listen when I was overtrained. I did not listen when I was feeling anger inside. I just stuffed it in. I was completely cut off from my body. So only in the head, overthinking, and doing everything to please others because I wanted my needs to be met. And the new version started with the body. I needed to reconnect with my whole nervous system in order to actually move. Because I wasn't paralyzed from a physical trauma, I was paralyzed from a neurological trauma. So what ended up happening at the day of the accident was that I had a hypoxic brain injury from being deprived of oxygen for too long after collapsing of a heat stroke. And that also created a domino effect where lactic acid completely damaged my nerve endings in the body. That's why I still deal with chronic pain until now. But what ended up happening for me, in order to move, the only thing that the doctor said they were like, okay, we don't think you'll ever move. You'll most likely be in a palliative care bed on the ventilator, and that's the rest of your life. And if you're lucky, you have about 5 years in that way, because the body deteriorates very quickly from that state. And that's what my family had prepared already. In those 2 months when I was in the coma, they already had the bed prepared and the palliative care for me. And what I ended up doing from day one, I felt this very deep sense of reconnecting with that inner boy, but also with my body. I felt like this was the first thing I needed to do. And that's what I did for the next 2 days. I had all the time in the world. Nobody could visit me except for 15, 20 minutes because I was in a sanitary regime. And the people that did visit me, I did not know who they were. So the first time when my family met me, I was partially numb, partially indifferent. But something in me was saying, these are the people that wish me well, obviously, because they were ecstatic when they saw me open my eyes. And there was a deep sense of knowing that through the body, I'll be able to achieve more. I then spent next 2 days, as I said, and I mean 2 days because in a palliative care bed in the ICU, you are not able to sleep. There's so many machines running around you. Sounds are like from horror movies, and your bed actually moves underneath you to prevent bed sores. So it's impossible to fall asleep. So I went from 2 months in a coma to about 2 weeks of insomnia. And the 2 days I just spent on trying to visualize every part that connects my little pinky to my brain. So I was closing my eyes and visualizing my brain. And I was like, okay, these are the neurons, everything, all the pathways connecting through my brain stem and everything, going from my neck through my vagus nerve, running through my hand all the way to my pinky. And I was just trying. Nothing was happening. And one of the nurses that came the second day, she said to me, we only could, by the way, communicate with clicks, right? So 2 for yes, 1 for no. And then she was like, oh, are you looking at your hand all the time? And I said, yes. And she's like, what's wrong? Is there a pain? I was like, yes. So I felt pain, but I couldn't move because every nerve ending was damaged, was burned. And through that pain and through that resistance, I stayed for those 2 days. And at some stage, almost like if you were to create an analogy, like going through the finish line that I didn't run through on the triathlon, I just spent last few hours that day of intensely focusing on that whole pathway, and my pinky moved. And that was the end of my recovery.
If you're finding value in this story, I'd love to invite you to hit the subscribe button below. You'll be the first to receive content just like this, honest, relevant, and here to support you on your journey. With every like and every follow, together we're succeeding in our mission and reconnecting the world with what matters most. And that is, of course, each other. Thank you so much. It's incredible. You're such a wonderful demonstration. I know people that are listening to this podcast, high achieving, high performing people that just are going after success and winning, much like you were, like pushing yourself to the absolute limits. So, and myself included, and I really love, I think it's Travis Pastrana, 199 Lives motocross guy.
Yeah, I know the guy.
In his documentary, like the way he was raised, his dad is like, you can always do more, militant father, and you can always go harder. And he goes, well, I found out that not to be true when I woke up after being unconscious, after running and pushing myself too hard.
Yes.
And that's always brought me inspiration, like going, oh yeah, but then I hear stories like yourself and going, well, yeah, inspiring, but there's a real, very real danger of pushing yourself to the absolute limits. Did you know that like this outcome would have been possible at that stage? Did you have signs of something coming and you're not listening? You know, for the people that are listening to this and going, yeah, I'll just keep pushing myself. Is there some kind of insight that you'd share with someone so they wouldn't have to necessarily put themselves into this risk and this danger for themselves?
No, yeah, of course.
And go, do something before you pay the ultimate price. And then you got the ultimate recovery as well, but not everyone has the opportunity to come back like you have.
Yes, a fantastic question. I think very useful as well for the listeners. There was hundreds of signs, not few. There was hundreds. The most in my face were the ones on my Garmin watch. It were early days. I don't think Whoop existed at the time, but if it did, it would be probably like recovery -5.
Wow.
The biggest signs were that I was fatigued all the time. I forgot how it was to feel energized, not by something from outside of me, like something from inside of me. So like coffee, 5 cups a day. I was working 60 to 80 hours a week at a time, and my to-do lists were infinite. And because of that, I felt intense a sense of anxiety at all times. And this is something that guides me now. The moment a very unique thought enters my mind, which means I don't have enough time. There's not enough time in 24 hours. That's the moment right now in my life I stop myself immediately. What I'm doing wrong to be so rushed. this is not right. This is not the most optimal state for me to be in. So that was the biggest guide from that time, where I felt like I needed 2 days. I needed 48 hours in a day to achieve things that I had on my plate. And that sense of anxiety was crippling because I was not present at all. I wouldn't be able to sit with you right now and breathe through my voice, breathe through my words, recall how I felt when I was 7. It was impossible. I didn't remember. If I sat 3 hours with someone, I wouldn't remember what happened below 10 years old when I was younger. It's just blocked. And it was blocked because I was in this constant state of anxiety-induced, future-connected, in a way, nothingness. Like I lived through optionalities, possibilities that most of them didn't happen. And the physical signs were massive bags under my eyes, not being able to sleep through the night fully. I was happy if I had 7 hours of sleep. That was like once maybe every 3 months. And that was after running myself to the ground, basically. Like, I felt that I didn't deserve to relax and sleep and recover, that I didn't do enough in the day that I could have a shut eye. That was the psychological part. More physical, I didn't enjoy eating. Like, I used to love eating, and really felt the taste and everything. And because everything was a part of a performance, it did not make any meaning. It didn't have any meaning, any pleasure of smell, taste. It was just fuel to fuel whatever comes next. Everything was calculated, optimized. Friendships were optimized. One of my friends actually said this perfectly. He said that he over-optimized his friendships by doing group dinners. And after each one of them, he would feel emptier rather than more fulfilled. I was grossly overtrained, wasn't present at all in my body, and I did not listen to even like the way I was breathing. It was always shallow.
It's incredible how much the human body can withstand, right? How much we can put it through. And I also think it's really incredible of how much then from the mind and our thinking will decide to put it through. Unconsciously, I think, through conditioning and everything else, but still there's a decision on some level to keep pushing well beyond what is healthy and functional to, in this case, hit the limits. And I think everyone might have different levels of limits and different kinds of limits, whether it's physical limits. One of the things that stands out for me and what it is that you've shared, and I've seen this as a common thread, is how the highest performers, the people that want to succeed the most, have the biggest drive and this relentless pursuit of excellence and whatever that means for them, is all comes from the head. And so disconnected. You mentioned disconnected from the head down, disconnected from our bodies, our presence, our emotional compass, and the way that I see emotions as our compass for navigating life, but I also see that's our experience for life. And some of the themes that you're mentioning too, you're not experiencing anything. It's just optimization and continuing to go. And so seeing that come back in your recovery, the first thing that you do is go, okay, get out of the head and back into the body. Talk me through that. Was that a conscious thought process? Was that something that was gifted to you while you were away for a few months in another world? Or was that your body just innate wisdom going, okay, this is the most important thing that we can do now?
I would say shortly, it felt innate. It felt that it came from a deeper sense of knowing naturally. And that's what I started doing. Straight away, the moment my finger clicked and moved, that's all I did. all the time in the ICU bed when I was in the hospital, in the first hospital, because I spent 6 months altogether in hospital. Yeah, that's all I did, and it was insanely rewarding as well, because every time I could move like a bigger part of my hand, then my shoulder, my arm, and I was filling myself with a lot of accomplishment.
Nice.
But through like connecting with my body, I was like, oh, now I can, I still feel pain, but I feel that it's moving. I'm doing something. And as I mentioned, like it was not a mistake what I said earlier. Is like when I moved my pinky, it was not the beginning of my recovery, it was the end. Because the end is that I know I will get there. And because I moved it, and it was with me and my sheer intention that I could achieve it, then that was the end. And that's how I see things now. I know once the intention is there that I can actually achieve it.
I love the sense of clarity and the direction of that intention and attention. It's like going from 0 to 1 is the biggest jump, right? Until we have the self-awareness and the intention to make the change, we can't take responsibility for it. And I love how you frame that as going, well, that's the biggest jump. That is the end point. Once we've got it, we're locked in on that. Well, it's only going to be success if we continue to work.
It's a choice.
It's a choice.
It's a choice.
How long did that process take to come back to going from moving a pinky being such a big deal to then walking again and being fully functional as far as I can see?
So altogether, to feel and be physically and mentally better than before the accident, it took 5 years.
Yeah, well, big process.
Of mostly daily work.
I would imagine with that, then reconnecting back with your nervous system, your emotionality, reconnected back to your body from more than the head down now, that must have fundamentally changed who it is that you are, going back to that emotional navigation system, being able to get the insights from your body, what's important to you. How did that then affect the way that you related to yourself, others, life in a broader sense?
When I learned how to actually accept how my body speaks to me through somatic experiences and just feeling what's running. Like I can tell you what's happening in my left foot now and my right big toe. Every part of my body is active, as is yours. I feel like, coming back to when we are connected to our mind and head only, the thoughts are sometimes just not able to even process everything that's happening in the body. And that's where the disconnection happens, is when we allow our sense of self have the belief that we are thinking beings with ability to feel emotions, rather than what I believe who we are is that we are emotional beings who have an ability to actually think. And for me, it became body first from day one. And that's the case all the time now. So I start my day by moving my body. I finish my day by moving my body and reconnecting with it and listening. It's just practice of listening. And what practices got me closer to that? I've became a yogi for a very long time. I moved with my breath. I connected to my lungs and my diaphragm. As I was rebuilding my muscle mass, as I was reconnecting every fiber and tissue, and especially the nervous system in my body, with my physiotherapist, we started to create little challenges for the body to be able to stand on one leg and then juggle something in the right one, and firing every part of the body. So that was a very intense process, between 4 to 6 hours every day.
Wow.
And on top of that, plus about 2 hours of mind work on memory, because my memory started to come back after 2 weeks, like flashbacks. But then properly, it took almost 2 years to come back to the memory of the past version of me, and also actually all memories, rather than the ones that were hiding me from the trauma that I've experienced as a boy. And that was also a very daring experience. So, in a nutshell, first 2 years were the most intense because I was healing my body. And at the same time, I didn't have a choice because my brain injury, the way it happened, it opened the floodgates to all the trauma that I've had in the past. So it's doing all of that at the same time.
Yeah.
5-year process, I would say the most intense first 2 years, and then establishing practices from Chinese medicine, from somatics, from movement coaches, and then realizing that everything that I will be able to listen through my body is the truth. So example being, and this is for the listeners now, whenever you feel triggered, something happened, and the easiest example is when you're driving in your car or a motorbike, whatever your choice is, and someone cuts you off in the traffic. You feel something, right? You may feel rage immediately, you may feel anger, or what it is for me, I feel compassion. But that wasn't the case. Before my accident, I felt rage. I felt anger. It's like, what the fuck is happening? Why this guy cut me off? And I wouldn't be able to listen to my body showing me, oh, this is what's happening. Whereas right now, I could feel it straight away. I feel the pit in my stomach. I feel maybe a change in the breathing pattern. And then be like, okay, what is this showing me? And every trigger now is in a way, a gateway to see how body is actually responding. And then ask it, okay, what is this activating from my past? Because I believe that every trigger that shows up is just a past unhealed or a need unfulfilled. And when that happens, just watch it. I would say I'm someone who is professionally watching myself.
I love that approach. I think in modern day society, at least in my world, what I've seen for a lot of times that's demonstrated to us, or at least communicated, is when there's a trigger, move away from it.
Of course, because it's uncomfortable.
It's uncomfortable. Move away from it. Take responsibility. Just remove yourself from that. And I'm like, well, it's not that helpful. Imagine if we kept on running away from all of our triggers, always. There would be no room for growth. We can never discover who it is that we are or step into a life that it is that we actually love. Versus what you're saying is go, well, what if we lean into the triggers?
Of course.
What if we find out what is going on there and start unpacking that? I think that takes a lot of vulnerability. It takes a lot of courage to go, find out that, oh, that person that was pissing me off, or actually that was on me. It's nothing to do with them. Oh, man. And then does that mean I suck? Does that mean I'm not good enough? Brings up all this other stuff that we've got to work through. When I talk to people that say, oh, I don't need personal development. I'm like, so what, you got all your stuff figured out? Like, you don't have any triggers? You don't need to go looking for it. You just need to observe it, hear it, feel it, see it, and then make the choice whether we're going to dive into that, right? I think it's a really wonderful message. I heard the other day when you're talking with Louisa in a podcast setup that wasn't a podcast. I wish we recorded that. That was a really great conversation as well. Talking about how as you connected more with your body, your emotions, your wife or partner, what was it, wife? Partner
I
at
was
the time.
married at the time, yes.
Married at the time. Wonderful woman that supported you through so much, stood by your side. It really made my heart, I don't even know what it did within me, but it did something within me to hear how the little gratitude and appreciation that you brought to her for looking after you in the way that she did, and still then going, I'm not the person that I once was, and we're not going to be together after that. Talk us through that process, because there must have been a lot within that. I can't even imagine.
It was the, where do I start? I would start first of acknowledging what you mentioned about, how grateful I was and I am still for her to show up in the way she did, because I needed to be honest with myself that if it wasn't for her and the doctors that she really pushed, I wouldn't be here with you right now. I mean, I love preventative medicine, but the trauma medicine that and trauma response that they've helped with and she helped with was the reason I'm here. And my family collapsed, her family collapsed, and she was the only one just staying day in, day out, trying to find out a way to save me. And she succeeded. And for that, I'll be forever grateful. However, on the other hand of that, as you mentioned, and I mentioned as well, I was going back through this process of uncovering myself again, getting to know who I was. And the person that came back obviously didn't know who Marcin was and now who Atlas is. It's been a process where I've been immediately shown these lenses from the family, from my wife, from my partner at the time as well. Like, oh, this is how you used to show up. So projections were immediate into my life. And as I was getting to know myself, I immediately started to be able to feel them rather than think about them. So I was just feeling them. And as I was feeling more of myself, I was naturally creating healthy boundaries, who I was immediately, and then communicating. What ended up happening, one of the days, my wife at the time said to me, I feel that I need to actually mourn you. And that was after a year where, so as a part of my gratitude, I said to her that when we come back to our normal life, back to Ireland, to me running the company and her career, because everything was on pause for a good 1.5 years. When we did, I said, okay, you have time for yourself now. Do whatever you need to do to go through this process, integrate. And when we came back, she said to me one of the first things she said was, I feel like I need to mourn the version of you that died that day, because the person that came back is very different. You're a different man that I've married. You are not a people pleaser anymore. You are strong with your boundaries. You know what you want, although you're still learning how to walk and all these things. And it was very confrontational to her. It triggered everything in her in a way that wasn't before, because I believed that happy wife was happy life, which meant I had very weak boundaries in the past. And now she was confronted with this person that was standing their ground, that knew exactly what they want. And what I wanted was intention. What I wanted was connection. What I wanted was a purpose that was bigger than just being, sending pictures on Instagram of a happy life or so. And our process was grief. Her process was grief. My process was rebirth. And I naturally started to learn about how to hold space for her, for myself. I then led the process of us getting to see if we're actually still aligned as a couple. And that was the unraveling of our marriage. We went through counseling as a couple, which was beautiful for me in a way to get to know myself even more, to hear and reflected back how I was before and how I was now. And at some stage it became just too exhausting for her. It would take her a week to go through her emotional regulation between the sessions, and one session a week. And there was one day when she said to me, we were just about to go for the 6th session, and she said, I'm not ready. I'm not able to do this because I'm not even recovered from the last one. What it asked of her was to show up for herself and not to avoid things. and she couldn't handle that. And that was the second time we did it. And at some stage we had to come to a conclusion where we're not compatible anymore. That we don't want the same things. What she wanted was to come back to the old me, old life, on old sense of control that she felt she had. And I wasn't allowing that because I wasn't someone who will be controlled anymore. And that clashed very strongly. And the feeling I've had through that was that I cannot repeat the same pattern that my old version did, which was self-abandonment. Because I abandoned myself time and time again. Not only for her, for my marriage, for my business, but for my friends, for my family, for everyone around. Because I was wearing a mask all the time. And when the mask was off, there's no self-abandonment anymore. And that was very daring and very scary for someone who was used to something else.
I love that you tie all that back into the self-abandonment and self-neglect. It's the consistent pattern of the highest achievers, right?
Yes.
And I think even the ones that are aware of it, they say, well, if I stop abandoning myself, I'm not going to have the success that I think it is that I need or want. But when we hear the story that you've shared, is it worth it? Do you need to? And maybe in your case, you'd say, well, it is because that's what was needed for you to go on the journey and discover who it is that you are and go through the process. And they say lucky or unlucky, it's like, well, good or bad, I don't know. It's all part of the process, right? For us. What I really loved about what you shared there is the strength that it takes for a people pleaser to come back and really discover your own personal boundaries and then communicate it. And in your case, like, big acknowledgements to her to be open enough to, and it sounds like, well, there was clash. I'm sure it wasn't easy the whole time, but for a people pleaser to come and have that courage and put those boundaries in place and be strong enough that what the receiving message is they're going to want to not want you to change, not want you to have those boundaries because they want to keep it the same. Because as you said, for the other person, I think for anyone that's abandoning themselves or caretaking or people pleasing, it enables them not to have to take care of their things. So you're doing yourself a disservice and you're doing them a disservice.
Yes.
And so acknowledging her for allowing you to go through the process and then also doing her best to go through the process as well. Like, what a gift that you gave each other, as well as recognizing how fucking hard that must have been, the clash between it all. Really, like, I think it's such an amazing journey. And a reflection I see is unless you can continue to grow together, the relationship will either one person will keep the relationship down, you're never going to progress, or you're going to drift apart. And I think that is far healthier to accept that, so then two individuals have the lives that it is that they want, where it is that they're at, and continue to grow, right?
Yes, exactly. I would put it shortly, and what you just said now, that I see from reflecting back on all these years on that relationship, but also others, and what I see with some of my clients as well, is that when there's a lot of relationships that don't last, they don't last based on two very major things that may happen. And one of them is one of the partners gets a break in their life, and they somehow, or by a lot of action and aligned action, they become very successful. The other person may just stay the same, but the other person becomes very successful, and the disparity gap is very different, very big, very large. And that gap, if it's too large and it's impossible to bridge it in time, can they then result with people going apart? Or if one person wants change and they're actually decided to heal. And that was our case. I wanted commitment. I wanted family as we got married, to have children and family. And that wasn't for her. That wasn't her. She chose her career. And as my old self would, I've abandoned myself, and I waited 4 years for that to happen. The new version was, no, there's someone else out there for me that would know exactly and be on the same page with me.
Beautiful.
And I know there was someone for her to not want to have that family and focus on career. And I wouldn't want to stop her from having her needs met.
Yeah, I love it. So now, where it is that you are, how do you navigate new relationships, whether it's friendships, intimate relationship, business relationships, in the broad category? What is it that you're observing, noticing, being intentional with, and who it is that you're establishing relationships with now, as opposed to your old ways of going about it? What's the contrast here?
I love that you already mentioned that word, because that's the one that I would say, if it was one word answer, it would be intentional. And what does that mean for me is that I have standards for friendships, I have standards for relationships, I have standards for business relationships. And
what do you mean by standards?
By standards, I mean that there is a certain level of communication, certain level of vulnerability, certain level of depth that is provided from that vulnerability, and ability to commit. If one of these things is not present, then I will not be able to step into that friendship, relationship, business partnership.
And so then how does expectations then align with standards? Because I imagine there's a level of standards, expectations different.
Oh yeah, of course, they're hugely different. So expectations, if I was to start it and frame it, I believe expectations are the thief of joy.
Okay.
In every way. I'm someone who has no expectations. And I replace that with standards. Because expectations are unspoken rules between people, whereas standards are spoken and well communicated rules of engagement. That would be the simplest way I could answer. How does that look in real life for me is that when I meet someone as a friend, for example, and I could say that to you right now, I believe that we are starting to connect more, and I'd love to have you as a friend in my life. What does that mean if we had that conversation? I would say to you, Daniel, I really love how you show up in life. That would be number one thing. And I see that you are an embodied man. I see how you look at life, how you engage with your community, with yourself, how you are as a leader, how you connect with your lady. And I'd love to connect with you. And how would like that look like would be, first of all, commitment to connecting at least once a week, meaningfully. Not going for dinner and laughing, but really getting to know each other in a way that I feel we're getting to know each other through this podcast. I have 3 very close friends, and it doesn't matter if they're in Bali right now or if they're traveling or wherever they are. We have in our calendars indefinitely 1.5 hour meeting every week. For some of them is a tea time. For some of them is a deep conversation. And we have a framework of loosely, obviously flowing through it as well, but there's a framework of how we connect. And that commitment is there to show up. And that's some of the standards, for example, for friendship. Always showing up truthfully. I don't want to spend an hour with a friend when he's telling me that everything is great. I'm fine. Everything is great.
Sure.
I want friends. The type of friends I have are the type of friends that I am, the friend I am, which is, You can call me at 3 a.m. I will not answer at 3 a.m., by the way. But you can call me, and if I pick up for some reason, I will not be asking you what's happening. I will just ask you, where do we need to go to, quote unquote, bury the body? I'm a friend who would check on you week in, week out, how everything is doing. How are you doing? Really, I really want to know how you're doing, because someone's emotions in the past were a burden. Right now, they're a pleasure. They're a gift to know how someone is actually doing. I'm a friend who really wishes you well. I celebrate the shit out of my friends, and I don't feel jealousy at all. I used to compete with men all the time. That was the biggest drive. I was competing for women. I was competing for resources. I was competing for money. As a financial advisor, it's mostly men in that industry. So, it was competing online, on Facebook, or everywhere to get more clients. Competing in sport. I was racing, downhill, motocross, triathlon, all of it. Mostly men. Right now, I embrace men to the point where friendships grow to brotherhood. I've never had a brother, but I feel like I have 10. So these are some of the standards for friendship. Where it comes to relationship, it's similar, but with even more depth.
Is it just standards, or do you have other parts that come into that? Does that tie in boundaries and needs? And is it mainly just standards that you're looking?
Oh no, I mean that incorporates what you said as well. Boundaries come through those standards. Standard I would say is a broader term, and then there's specific needs underneath. Boundaries, non-negotiables, all these
things. It's quite important, because one of the things I see, especially in the world of, so I'm working in the space of developing self for healthier, more functional, intimate relationships, and intimacy being a broad term for, say, rapport. I think we can have intimacy together as brothers. I think that's a really beautiful thing. It doesn't have to be just like sexual intimacy. I think we're missing a big part of that. One of the things that come up a lot with the guys that I speak to, they go, I don't have a romantic relationship, or I can't hold a great relationship because I've got really high standards. Women say this as well, actually.
Yeah.
And it's like, so when you're talking through these standards, these don't necessarily seem like standards that keep people out. These are standards of communication that allow people in.
Yes.
And so that's why I asked the question, like, there must be more than just standards, because you can have really functional standards and you can have really dysfunctional standards.
Yes.
How do you visualize and communicate that, and how does that show up in your relationships, especially when it comes to intimate or romantic relationships and dating?
Of course. I love the way that you recaptured it. I think it's very important to be aware that there could be unhealthy standards that people have, and as you mentioned, women nowadays can have almost delusional standards for relationships. And some men as well may have delusional standards for their beauty and how women show up, how should show up in the relationships. If we were to move specifically for intimacy and connection with women, I look at, I will differentiate how men, in my way, what's the currency, how they communicate, and how we create intimacy, and how I would create intimacy with women. For me, connection with a man is based on respect. We as men, and I will speak for myself, as my experience of being a man, I want to receive respect first. That's my currency. Whereas I feel that women want to be adored. And that's just on base of that. If someone tells me, oh, men and women are the same. We're not the same. Just by that. Because I don't want to be adored and a woman doesn't want to be respected. If you really think about it. So back again, men to men, I respect you and I know you respect me. That's why we're sitting in these chairs.
And to add on to that, we don't necessarily have to like each other.
Yes.
Well, that's not the case here,
Yes.
obviously, but you can respect someone without necessarily liking them, having to be their friend.
Exactly. Whereas following with the intimacy, to create intimacy, you have to look someone in the eyes. You want to, and I'm inviting you, right, into me see. And
I love that.
When I allow you to see me, I allow you to get to know me. And just to allow you to see me, I need to know what my boundaries are. And I think that is the first layer where it comes to connection, a proper connection. Because if we, as a people pleaser, I was wearing a mask of, I'm boundless. I just want connection. I want someone to accept me. Therefore, I will strip myself from boundaries. Which means I don't show people how to treat me. Whereas as someone who really wants intimacy, they want to show themselves as who they are. So leading with boundaries is showing other people how to treat you.
I love that.
And that's probably the first layer, I would say. Obviously, to show that, you need to have an open communication. So this would be the first two layers. Where it comes to connecting with women, I'm right now in a committed relationship as of quite, how do you say, recently.
Congratulations.
And the way we connect with each other is we dropped the masks of any new connection immediately and went into deeper conversations, into communication with truth, into showing each other, yeah, this is who I am, this is who I am, and in a way, someone could say assessing compatibility, seeing if the deepest layers, which is values, align. And for me, that's the most important part at the beginning, is to see if values of the person in front of me, or a woman or a man, align. And that can come across as many different ways. One example being, if I'm on a first date with someone and we are in a restaurant or a cafe, and I see they look down or outright belittle or feel really, I would say, above a serving staff, that's something that tells me that person is probably not a kind person. And that's first and most layer for me, because, and I'll expand on this why, if there's no kindness in a person, that means they are probably not empathetic, and it's very hard for them to connect with their emotions, and it will be very hard for them, while you have conflict, to still show up kindly for themselves and you. So that's one of the layers that I always scan for.
I really like how that would turn into, we could go into a whole conversation of red flags around that.
Yes.
I hear this come up, both from males and females, talking about red flags. And most of the time, what people say is a red flag is not a red flag. All it required was maybe a question or a further exploration of why it is, like it's a difference in opinion rather than a red flag. Versus what you're sharing, like if somebody's fundamentally not kind, well, as you mentioned, there's red flags on that on a much deeper level of compatibility, right? Or going, what is going to be really important here in this relationship? everything that you're talking around here is fundamental, it's crucial, but without having the knowledge and the wisdom of the connection with self, it becomes impossible.
Yes.
Now, when you're talking about showing up as the authentic you, people say, oh, authenticity. How can you be authentic without having done and been, not necessarily through the exact journey that you've been through, but the personal growth journey of coming back to what is it that we're really feeling? What's important to us? Who is it that we are? So then we can even start showing up and communicating these things, right? I think it's so fundamental. Going all the way back to the standards and the expectations, and I just wanted to put in here, because I know some of the people that I work with will be listening going, Daniel doesn't agree with that. And I really want to talk to the semantics around it. And that's why I was asking, what does it mean? I think fundamentally we have the same kind of thought process on it, but it's really interesting how everyone puts it a little bit different. You said, expectations are the thief of all joy. I think in the way that you articulated it, yeah, absolutely. I also love expectations, and in a conversation podcast I just recently did with Francois, and he goes, expectations aren't that helpful if they're kept inside. So the next step is then communicating them, and they become agreements, expectations, and then agreements, and then we can communicate them. And I was like, yeah, this is really great. So you call them standards. The way that I say standards are for me, and the way that I show up. And I would love my expectation and agreement, hopefully with you as a friend, is I'll say, can you help me hold me accountable to my standards in the way that I'm going to commit to?
Love that.
And so that's my expectation of you. And it only becomes an expectation of you once I've communicated it, Francois agreed upon it. And now we have this really great relationship. And then something happens that I don't like, I can be like, well, this is my expectation. And then we start talking about the boundaries around that. Like I say, a simple boundary expectation for me is punctuality. I really love when people show up on time, like you did today. I'm going to come 10 minutes early, and then you weren't able to come 10 minutes early. I'm going to be a few minutes late. I'm like, awesome, amazing. Show up 20 minutes late every time, half an hour. I'm like, okay, this is getting to a point of I need to communicate this boundary. I don't appreciate. I think that's a lack of respect to yourself for showing up late in time, but also to me and the time that I've got. And now we have a healthy, functional relationship based on communication. And everything that it is that you articulated. So thank you for sharing these things, because I'm listening to it going, yes, we need more of it. We need more of these conversations in the world.
Yeah. I think the gateway to all of that is, as you mentioned and so beautifully articulated, is that we know ourselves, we know our standards, we know our agreements, we know our expectations. And as you were sharing, I've had a realization that expectations, as I see them, are a thief of joy when unspoken. And I think what just transpired for me is that they change as agreements when they are spoken. So that's what I operate on, agreements. And I think that's beautiful. And then thank you for that realization, because a simple example would be, let's agree that we show up on time. That's an expectation spoken. And that's how I like to operate. How I voice it, how I say it as well, is like, I would love for you to show up this way. For example, in a relationship or a friendship, it's like, and I always go by this another rule, I would say, is that I never expect from someone or create an agreement with someone that I cannot hold myself accountable for as well.
So important.
So if I am unpunctual, but I want someone else to be punctual, that's just being hypocritic, right? So that would be the main rule.
I love how that ties into boundaries as well. When people go, oh my, what you're talking about with the boundaries and the vulnerability. We can't be vulnerable if we don't have healthy, intact boundaries ourselves, because we're not going to put our vulnerability out there without the knowingness that we can handle. If somebody comes and tramples all over our vulnerability, but we don't have the trust in ourselves to go, hey, I did not like the way that you treated that situation, you treated me or whatever, I was being vulnerable, I put myself out there and you fully disrespected it. If I'm not able to then communicate that boundary, I'm not going to be vulnerable. It's not going to be there. And I think, like the way that you're articulating before around the standards and specifically the boundaries is, it's not about, I think a lot of people think about boundaries as keeping people out, but it's really, and I think you said this, is it's about teaching people how it is that you want to be interacted with.
Yes.
The relationships of how can you enter this world, into my world specifically. I think that's a really wonderful distinction to make, because boundaries get a bad rap. And sure, we can have enmeshment, which is a total lack of boundaries, and that's all caretaking, people pleasing, narcissism, all tied together, and dysfunctional meeting of each other's needs, versus on the other end of the scale, over rigid boundaries where no one can get in at all. And I'm really fucking lonely and disconnected. I've been there for a lot of my life because no one can get in to even know who it is that I am. And somewhere we gotta find out, okay, who is it that we are? What are the boundaries? How can I be vulnerable? And then allow people in to meet me there.
Of course. That's beautifully said. I would just throw in another part of it. As you were mentioning about vulnerability and boundaries, there's the way I see it is that for us to be vulnerable, we have to have. So if you were to imagine that I have a floating dome around me of energy, let's say, so my energy of vulnerability is extending up to my knees, let's say. My boundaries needs to be over that. And what do I mean by that? Is exactly what you mentioned. It's like, if I can be vulnerable to this point and I get disrespected or someone breaks my boundaries or pushes them, my boundary needs to be strong enough to hold that vulnerability. Because what I've seen time and time happen is people almost push themselves to be vulnerable. And I've seen this for men as well. And this is a sad example where a man has been asked by a woman to, oh, baby, I want you to feel me, feel the emotions, show me how you are and everything. And then the moment they actually do, it either happens in that moment or later on gets weaponized against them. But when it happens is the man becomes vulnerable above what he's actually comfortable to do, and the level of comfortable is his boundary. So he extend his vulnerability above his boundary. The moment he is seen, it may take a snarky comment or unintentional comment from a woman, and immediately, because that boundary is not there to protect that vulnerability, he gets swamped in straight away. And he sucks that vulnerability back again. And he's not going to show again how he really felt because he didn't have the boundary to protect that vulnerability.
It's such a good example. I've got a recent personal experience on exactly that. I can speak to this between Louise and I because we have a very healthy, functional relationship that is still growing. It's still real. And I think it's important to understand the constructs. I'm trained in this. Louise is not. She is an amazing woman that can help support and help me grow as well. And coming to the understanding between each other is actually really difficult in practice. And the example of what you were just sharing, like the context of it is fucking ridiculous. I get home, she's eaten half a cookie that I was really looking forward to. It's not about the cookie.
It was your cookie.
It was my cookie, and she ate half the cookie. It's not about the fucking cookie. I had to say that a lot. It's not about the cookie. But in that moment, I felt like a lot of disappointment. I felt frustration. I felt anger. And like a lot of the time, I just suck it up. People pleaser, like you don't want conflict, all of this kind of stuff. You don't want to open up a can of worms or whatever. But one of the things that I am very proud of and that I coach and I teach and I feel like I need to be a better demonstration for is healthy expression of emotions. What does that mean? Well, in that moment, I stomped my foot and acted like a little child. Fuck my cookie, it's gone. And so that then, and okay, the thing that I didn't do very functional is I walked out and I slid the ranch slider a bit too hard and it slammed shut. So, but I didn't punch anything. I didn't bring a rage. I didn't lash out. I didn't blame her for anything. But my demonstration of emotion still in that moment, because coming from also a people-pleasing background or like, caretaking and like seeing the emotion, that triggered her. So she's like, well, do you want me to buy you another cookie? I'm like, no, it's not about the fucking cookie. I don't want the cookie. And so I went away, I calmed down, I came back, but like she was now triggered by this, which rightfully, wrongfully so, whatever, that's her thing to be dealing with, and I understood that. What I didn't like, though, is that in her trigger, she then shamed or judged my demonstration of emotion. At least that's what I felt. The question she asked was, is that normal for a grown man? So what I made it mean, I take responsibility for it, is going, well, is it normal for a grown man? Well, so grown men aren't supposed to demonstrate this emotion? Like, I was proud of myself that I demonstrated, I felt my emotion and I let it out. Pulled a face, stomped my foot, whatever. It didn't hurt anyone and it didn't damage anything. And ecologically, it was great, apart from the trigger on her. And so in that moment, I was like, it felt like I was being accused of being immature. It felt that I was being judged. It felt like, there was a level of shame around it. And see, if I wasn't so aware and conscious of the actions I was taking and the boundaries that I had, it would be exactly what you just described. I'd want to withdraw, retreat, and never do that again. So what does that mean? Well, I have to suppress it. I can't do that around her. What does this mean? This is the conversation that I was having. This is the conversation that we need to have together. And it was a really hard conversation. She was upset by the way that I behaved because she was making it mean what she was making it mean. It was really hard to upset. I don't think she didn't, she wasn't consciously shaming me, but that's what I was making it mean. We had to come together and going, okay, what are the appropriate responses from each other here? And so, it took overnight, kind of a couple of days, a couple of conversations that were a bit heated and, emotional or whatever. And then we came back going, well, so what I require is a bit of respect. And what she requires is basically not to slam the door, and maybe and I don't really like this, but being more conscious of going, well, if there was something, that I'm upset by that is going to trigger her, that she might feel at blame for, just be aware of that. And so that I can do it and go and experience the emotion myself. I can take care of that and then come back and then have a mature conversation. A conversation that is going to go, okay, this is how it goes, rather than slamming the door. And so it's just a continual practice. Keep showing up. That. Yeah, well, thank you for bringing that up, because I think it is see, I'm proud of the way that I get to experience my life more, and I'm proud of being able to have that conversation through a structure that works. Man, it's taken a long time to get there.
No, I want to applaud you for being able to go and hold yourself through that process. It happens similar to me in that kind of structure. How I look at it is very simply, it's FFS. That's the beginning of the conversation.
For fuck's sake.
Exactly. Oh, I love that. No, it's actually fact, feeling, and story.
Oh, okay.
Ka-ching. But these situations, this is like I would express my boundary through that, and I would say, listen, the fact is that I was really looking forward to this cookie, right? I was dreaming about it while I was riding a bike home, and I wanted the whole cookie. But the fact is that you actually took something away from that cookie, and it's only half now, or whatever it was. And it made me feel, and I would say exactly what, I'm speaking from my experience because I went through that same the scenario. It was just apple pie. And I would say I was just
the sugar cravings are strong.
Yes.
It's like a drug, man.
Yeah.
Make you do weird things.
And then I would say it made me feel this way. It made me feel that way. And the story I'm making about this, the feelings that I'm feeling now, I would say is that you don't really care. You didn't care to ask for permission. You didn't care about, and if it's later about these emotions that I'm showing, that I don't feel that you actually care about the impact that you've caused. And then I always end with a question like, is that story true for you?
Yeah,
and that always starts to help to unravel the situation, and then usually ends with a healthy expectation, and then into agreement, which I call a need, and then or a request.
That's the beautiful outcome, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like, every time, I always say this on new relationships. I think I might have asked you this the other day. Have you come up against any challenging times?
In conflict,
In
yeah.
conflicts,
Yeah.
because it's these conflicts that then result, providing that you're going to take the time and then the appreciation that the conflict requires you, then to come out the other side with a bit more of an understanding of how this relationship can be even better. Every time I'm sitting there, like one other time I remember, like 2 years ago, I was sitting in Dominican Republic and we went through like 3 days of just this stupid conflict. And like it was basically me challenging her, going, well, what is your need here? And every time I asked her, well, or your expectation is this. It was something about talking to other girls or exes, or like, what is it? And every time I challenged her, she didn't know. And it felt like I had no concern that we're going to break up, but it was like basically it could have been a breakup conversation if either of us were immature enough to just give up. But what we sat with, we just kept on seeking what the truth was for each of us and then coming to an agreement on it. At the end of the day, it was very simple. Yeah. But like when you get to the other side of it, how much more connected you feel, at least in my case, every time, feeling so much more connected. I'm like, that was worth it.
Of course. And I love that you mentioned connection at the end of this, because I used to, as a people pleaser, and this is, if you feel this way, and if you listen to this as a woman or a man, please work on this. You shouldn't be afraid of conflict.
Agreed.
I look at conflict right now as a means for deeper connection, deeper understanding, deeper alignment, and intimacy. It's the catalyst that I've found to be the most profound in a relationship. And how you go through conflict is without self-abandoning and actually stating who you are as you are through this conflict, being able to regulate your emotions and show up fully, being able to communicate when it's too much for you through the conflict process as well, because that's obviously allowed, is, in my opinion, the, I would say, one of the foundational layers of seeing if a actual relationship will last. Because, and this is scientifically proven, for every conflict we have, even for micro conflict, so micro conflict needs the same amount, so ratio is 1 to, I don't want to misquote it, either 7 or 9, but it's high. 1 conflict, 7 positive experiences. And if that's not 7, then you're still in repair. So if you have a conflict and it's resolved, you need to create, as part of that resolution, between 5 to 7 positive experiences for you to come back to your, let's say, normal line of intimacy. And if there is a repeated conflict, which means that the conflict in the first place that appeared is not properly resolved and dissolved, because if there is a pattern of repeated conflict, that means it's not been dealt with. That has an ability to erode a relationship over time.
And we see that.
And I've seen this many times with friends, with other people, where once, if they had an ability to go into conflict healthy way, resolve it, and repair it through intimacy, then they're back to baseline and growing, actually.
I love that. I wonder if there's research around what if the conflict ratio is like 1 to 20 or 30, like you don't have enough like conflict points. You've got just too many positive points.
Yes, then you have two people pleasers.
Living totally out of sync with who it is that they are.
Then it's two people pleasers. And then,
well, I think that probably ends up in resentment.
Yes.
I don't know whether there's studies behind it, but that's where my mind would go.
Of course, yeah. Resentment is a gateway to huge anger.
Yeah, for sure. Atlas, thank you so much for coming along on this podcast. Everything that you've shared is so in alignment with what it is that I feel like I truly believe in my heart. Your story is incredible. You're such a wonderful demonstration of where it is that you could be and what can then happen. And then, for better or for worse, if you do get to that breaking point and that you have to relearn everything, well, you come back an even better version of yourself. I think it's really wonderful, and I love that you not have just lived to tell the tale, but you're here telling the tale, sharing your wisdom, sharing your insights. I think it's very much needed. It's something that I'm hugely passionate about. This is the Reconnect You podcast. I'm wondering, before we wrap up, do you have any other bits of insight, advice, something that is right there within you that we haven't already spoken about that you'd love to share here, long or short? Where it comes from that shifting of self-abandonment, so we can go into living with intention, on purpose, to create a life that we can fall in love with even more.
I would invite every man that listens to this to reconnect with his why. Because through that process, you will get to know who you are.
Beautiful.
That's it.
Thank you so much, brother. Thank you for being here.